At a family dinner, Grandma turned to me and asked, "Is the $1,500 I send you monthly enough?" The whole room went silent. Forks stopped midair, glasses froze in people's hands, and every single eye locked on me. Some were shocked, some confused, and a few carried that sharp glint of jealousy. That was the exact moment I realized my life was about to turn upside down. Stay with me through this story, because what happened after that one innocent question changed everything in my family. And if you feel something from this story, don't forget to show love by liking, sharing, or subscribing, because your support truly means a lot. We were all seated around Grandma's long oak dining table that night. She had made her famous roast chicken, the one that always made the house smell like home. My cousins were laughing about some college story. My brother Mark was bragging about his new car, and my older sister Danielle was scrolling on her phone like she wasn't really there. It was just another typical family gathering, or so I thought. When Grandma dropped that question, the air grew heavy. I froze in my seat, completely blindsided. I had never asked her to say anything like that in front of everyone. My heart raced as whispers started circling the table. I could hear Hannah, my cousin, mutter, "Wait, Grandma sends her money?" Danielle raised her head so slowly, eyes narrowing at me like she had just caught me stealing. I swallowed hard and forced a small smile. "It's been helping a lot, Grandma." "Thank you," I said softly. I didn't explain more, didn't defend myself, because honestly, I was too shocked to even form the right words. The silence dragged on for a few seconds too long, and I felt every bit of it pressing down on me. My father cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to change the subject, but it didn't work. Danielle let out a sharp little laugh, the kind that wasn't funny at all. Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, eyes full of questions he wasn't voicing yet. I tried to focus on the plate in front of me, but I could feel the heat of their stares. Grandma, bless her heart, went right back to serving dessert like nothing unusual had been said, but the damage was already done. That dinner ended with forced smiles and stiff hugs. But I knew nothing about my family dynamics would ever be the same after that moment. Because behind those looks were stories I didn't know yet, jealousy, resentment, and betrayal that had been quietly brewing under the surface. And that night, all it took was one simple question to drag it into the open. The dinner was over, but the stares stayed with me long after I left the table. Danielle's eyes, sharp and cold, followed me even when she wasn't looking directly at me. Mark had that same tight expression he wore whenever he felt someone had gotten something he didn't. And Hannah, sweet, usually quiet Hannah, wouldn't even meet my gaze. Instead, she whispered with Danielle, her lips curling into a smirk every so often. It wasn't the first time I felt like the outsider in my own family, but this time it cut deeper. Grandma had always been there for me, more than anyone else. When I was a teenager and Mom and Dad were too busy fighting to notice the bills piling up, it was Grandma who stepped in. I remembered nights in her cozy little house, the scent of lavender always in the air, while I tried to finish homework on her kitchen table. She never made me feel like a burden. Instead, she'd quietly slide an envelope across the table and say, "Just a little help to keep you steady, Maddie." Those moments had kept me afloat, though I never asked for them. The truth was, Grandma's support was the only reason I finished college. Without her, I would have dropped out after freshman year when my financial aid fell short. I worked 2 jobs, barely sleeping, and still couldn't make rent. I could still see myself sitting in my tiny apartment, head in my hands, wondering how I was going to eat that week. Then Grandma called, telling me to come over. She didn't ask questions. She just cooked me dinner and handed me enough to cover my rent. She said she believed in me, that one day I'd stand on my own feet and repay the world in ways bigger than money. Those memories made me ache as I sat in the present, facing the hostile silence of my family. Danielle finally broke it with a bitter laugh. "So all this time, you've just been milking Grandma like some kind of spoiled kid?" Her voice was loud, sharp enough to slice through the fragile peace at the table. I felt my chest tighten. "Danielle, it's not like that," I said quickly, trying to keep my voice calm. I never asked Grandma for anything. She wanted to help me when I was struggling. You know how hard things were for me. But the look she gave me said she didn't care. To her, it didn't matter if I had begged or not. All she saw was money flowing my way while she got nothing. Mark leaned forward, shaking his head, and muttered, "Figures." Grandma always did have a favorite. I wanted to scream that it wasn't favoritism, that Grandma had simply been there when no one else was. But I kept my mouth shut, staring down at my plate instead. because deep down I knew the truth.
I was barely pulling my
no
coat
matter
on
what I
when
said,
Danielle caught
the
me
seed
in the
of betrayal
betrayal
had
had
already
already
been planted.
She leaned against
It
the
was
wall
only a
with
matter
her
of
arms
time
crossed.
before it grew. Her lips twisted in a way that told me this wasn't going to be a casual chat. Her voice was low but sharp enough to cut through me. You know I'm telling Mom and Dad about this, right? Grandma doesn't need to be handing you checks every month like some charity case. They'll make sure she stops. I blinked at her, taken aback by how direct she was. Danielle, it's not like that. I never once asked Grandma for money. She offered because she knew I was struggling. You know what I went through in school? You know how hard I've been working just to stay afloat. She scoffed, shaking her head like my words meant nothing. Struggling or not, it looks pathetic. And it's unfair. You've had enough of her help. It's time she stops. She brushed past me before I could answer, leaving the faint scent of her perfume and the heavy weight of her threat behind. I stood frozen in the hallway, trying to calm my breathing. Danielle had always been competitive, always trying to one-up me. But this felt different. This felt like war. A few days later, I thought maybe she'd cooled down. I focused on work, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. But then my phone rang. It was my landlord. His tone was cold, almost irritated. Madison, your rent payment didn't clear this month. We haven't received anything. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I mailed the check on time, like always. Well, it never came, he said firmly. If we don't get payment within 5 days, you'll be charged a late fee. I hung up, my hands trembling. I knew I had written that check. I even remembered sealing the envelope and sliding it into the mailbox. For it not to show up? It felt too coincidental. Too perfectly timed after Danielle's little threat. My mind began racing. Could she have done something? Could she really go that far, meddling with my rent just to prove a point? I wanted to dismiss the thought, tell myself I was being paranoid. But deep down I knew my sister. Danielle wasn't above manipulation. She wasn't above crossing lines. I sat on my couch that night staring at the wall, my heart pounding. This wasn't just resentment anymore. This was sabotage. I could feel it. Danielle wasn't just jealous, she was plotting against me. And if she was willing to mess with something as important as my rent, I couldn't even imagine what she might try next. That was the moment it hit me. My own family wasn't just angry at me. They were ready to destroy me. And I had no idea how far they would go. The call came late in the evening, just as I was cleaning up my tiny kitchen. My phone buzzed, and when I saw my mother's name on the screen, I smiled, thinking maybe she wanted to check in. But the moment I answered, her voice shot through the line, sharp and furious. Madison, what on earth have you been doing to your grandmother? I froze, my stomach knotting instantly. Mom, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, she snapped. Danielle told us everything. She said you've been convincing your grandmother to give you money every month. $1,500, Madison? Are you serious? Do you have no shame? The word stung like a slap. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. That's not true. I never convinced Grandma of anything. She offered to help because she knew how hard things were for me. I would never manipulate her, Mom. Never. But she wasn't listening. Her voice only grew harsher, each word cutting deeper. You've always been selfish. You've always taken advantage of people's kindness. And now you're doing it to your own grandmother? She's old, Maddie. She doesn't need the stress of you draining her every month. How greedy can you be? My throat tightened. Greedy? Mom, you don't even know the truth. I've been struggling for years, and Grandma stepped in because she loves me. I never asked for this. Why would you believe Danielle over me? Because Danielle wouldn't lie about something like this, she snapped back. You think we don't see how you only care about yourself? You don't care about family. You only care about what you can get. The line went quiet after that, but only for a moment. I realized she was waiting for me to respond, to defend myself, but what could I even say? My chest ached. My own mother believed the worst of me without even asking for my side. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, I can't believe you think that about me. She didn't reply. She just exhaled sharply, muttered something under her breath, and hung up. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words she could have thrown at me. I stood there for a long time, staring at my phone, my hands trembling. Anger burned hot in my chest, but beneath it was something worse, heartbreak. My sister had twisted the truth so completely that even my mother saw me as a villain. I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and drove straight to Grandma's house. The entire way there, my thoughts spun in circles, hurt, anger, betrayal. If anyone knew the truth, it was Grandma. I needed to hear it from her. I needed to know that at least she still trusted me, even if the rest of my family didn't. I pulled into Grandma's driveway, the porch light glowing softly against the night. My hands were still shaking as I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, trying to gather myself. I hated coming to her house upset, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. She deserved to hear what was happening, and I needed to know the truth from her lips. When she opened the door, she looked surprised to see me. "Maddie, sweetheart, what are you doing here so late?" Her voice was warm as always, the same gentle tone that had carried me through so many storms in my life. I tried to smile, but my eyes betrayed me. "Grandma, can we talk?" She nodded and guided me inside, her hands soft against my back. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd spent so many nights as a teenager, books spread out while she brewed tea. She poured me a cup without asking, like she always did, and waited for me to speak. "Grandma," I started, my voice trembling, "why did you tell everyone about the money? Now they think I've been taking advantage of you." Her brows knit together, and she sighed. "Oh, Maddie, I never meant for it to come out that way. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. You've been working so hard, and I wanted you to have some stability." I blinked, trying to keep my tears back. "So it was really your idea? You offered." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Of course it was. I trusted you the most, Maddie. You've always been responsible, always trying your best. I never thought of it as charity. I thought of it as giving you the chance you deserved." For a moment, relief washed over me. But then her expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face. "But Danielle came by earlier this week," she admitted softly. "She told me it wasn't fair. She said I was dividing the family, that by helping you, I was making the others feel less loved. She said I should think of all my grandchildren equally." The words hit me like a brick. Danielle had gotten to her. "So she guilt-tripped you," I muttered, bitterness seeping into my tone. Grandma's eyes filled with conflict. "She was very persuasive, Maddie. And she made me feel like maybe I was wrong. I don't want to create tension between you all. I love you, but I love them too." I stared at the tea in front of me, my chest tight. It wasn't Grandma's fault. She was just trying to keep the family together. But knowing that Danielle had twisted things so far, had made Grandma question her own choices, lit a fire in me. It wasn't Grandma who betrayed me. It was my sister. And for the first time, I saw just how far Danielle was willing to go to tear me down. The news came quietly, almost too calmly for the storm it stirred inside me. Grandma sat me down one afternoon, her eyes heavy with guilt. She told me Danielle and Mark had both come to her, insisting it wasn't fair for her to keep helping me when she hadn't been doing the same for them. They said it was dividing the family, that I was being treated like the favorite. Grandma sighed as she explained she had decided to stop the monthly support altogether, saying she wanted to keep things fair. The words lodged in my chest like glass. I nodded, trying to look understanding, but inside I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. That money wasn't about luxury. It was survival. It had been my lifeline while I worked myself to the bone trying to keep up with everything. Without it, rent loomed over me, my car payment threatened to slip out of reach, and the stack of bills on my counter suddenly looked like a mountain I had no way of climbing. I went home that night and sat on my bed, staring at the numbers in my bank account. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every calculation I tried ended with me coming up short. Fear pressed against my ribs, but beneath it, something else began to stir, a slow, simmering anger. That weekend, we all gathered again for a cousins' get-together. I hadn't planned to go, but something in me wanted to see them, to look my siblings in the eye. The laughter and chatter filled the living room, but I kept to myself, staying near the edge of the crowd. That's when I heard it. Danielle's voice, low but sharp, floated across the room. She was leaning close to Hannah, her glass of wine in hand, her smirk wide. "She's not so special now, right? Let's see how she survives without Grandma's money. She'll crumble. I guarantee it." Hannah giggled nervously, glancing around, but Danielle just kept talking, her tone dripping with satisfaction. All that time she thought she was the chosen one. Now she'll see what it feels like to be normal. The words sliced through me, each one colder than the last. My fists clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms. For a moment, I wanted to storm across the room, scream at her, tell everyone what she had done. But I stopped myself. That was what she wanted, for me to break down, to prove her right. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to think. If Danielle wanted a war, I wasn't going to fight it with reckless words or tears. No, I would be smarter. I would be patient. As I stood there in the corner, Watching her laugh, I made a silent promise to myself. This wouldn't end with me crumbling. It would end with the truth, and when it did, Danielle wouldn't be the one smirking anymore. The anger I carried after hearing Danielle's words became fuel. Instead of breaking me, it sharpened me. I started paying closer attention, listening when people thought I wasn't around, watching their little habits and conversations. That's when I discovered something that made my blood boil even more. Danielle and Mark weren't innocent. They had been dipping into Grandma's generosity for years, just in ways that were less obvious than my monthly checks. It started with a slip of the tongue from Hannah one afternoon. She mentioned how lucky Danielle was that Grandma had paid off her credit card debt last year. My heart skipped, but I stayed quiet, pretending I already knew. Then Mark bragged one evening to a friend on the phone, not realizing I was in the next room, about Grandma co-signing his car loan so he could drive around in his new SUV. The pieces clicked together. All this time, they painted me as the greedy one, but they were hiding their own benefits. That night, I drove to Grandma's house under the pretense of helping her with groceries. While she cooked, I offered to organize some of her paperwork. She trusted me, as always, and handed me the box where she kept her receipts and notes. My hands shook as I flipped through envelopes, check stubs, and bank slips. There it was, clear evidence. Checks written to Danielle to pay off debts. Notes about money loaned to Mark for his down payment. Even Hannah had taken help once when she wanted to cover tuition. I carefully copied down dates, amounts, anything I could use later. I didn't want to humiliate Grandma. She had only ever acted out of love. But I needed the truth ready for when the time came. Danielle and Mark had painted me as the villain for years, and I wasn't going to let their lies stand any longer. Still, I knew the timing mattered. If I rushed it, they'd twist the story again and make me look petty. No, I needed the right moment, the kind of moment where the truth would sting the most, where they couldn't escape or spin it. In the meantime, I threw myself into work. I picked up extra shifts, stayed late, even worked weekends. The exhaustion was brutal, but it was proof, to myself and to Grandma, that I could stand without anyone's help. I wanted her to see that I wasn't leaning on her, that I was strong enough to carry my own weight. Late at night, when I collapsed into bed, the plan kept me going. I pictured the looks on Danielle's and Mark's faces when I laid out the truth. I imagined their smugness turning to silence, their whispers replaced by shame. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But one thing I knew for certain, their hypocrisy wouldn't stay hidden forever. And when I revealed it, the fallout would change everything. The dining room was buzzing with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the smell of roast turkey. Maddie sat quietly at the far end of the long table, her hands folded in her lap. Every laugh, every passing plate, every cheerful toast felt like a mask stretched over the tension she knew was waiting to spill. Danielle, seated 2 chairs down, wore her usual smug expression, whispering little comments to Hannah and chuckling in Maddie's direction. Mark was boasting loudly about his new truck, as if his success came solely from his grit. Maddie stayed composed, her chest heavy with the weight of what she was about to do. When the plates were cleared and dessert was being served, she pushed her chair back slightly, catching everyone's attention. "Before we wrap up," she began, her voice calm but steady, "I'd like to say something." The chatter died down. Danielle smirked, leaning back in her chair as if waiting to watch Maddie embarrass herself. Grandma looked up with warm, expectant eyes. Maddie swallowed hard, but the fire in her heart steadied her words. "I want to thank you, Grandma," she said, looking directly at her. "You've helped me more than anyone could have imagined. Your support got me through difficult years, and I'll never forget that. But I want you to know, I no longer need the monthly money. I've been working extra hours, building myself up, and I can stand on my own 2 feet now." A murmur rippled through the table. Danielle's smirk widened into a grin, as though she'd just won the final battle. "Well, good," she said with a mock-sweet tone. "Guess it's about time, don't you think?" Maddie's gaze snapped to her sister, sharp as glass. "Yes, it is about time," she replied coolly. "But what I find funny, Danielle, is that you called me greedy when you've been taking just as much, if not more, from Grandma." The air thickened instantly. Danielle blinked, her smirk faltering. Maddie reached into her bag and laid out crisp papers on the table, photocopies of checks, receipts, and notes. "Didn't Grandma pay off your credit card debt last year?" Maddie's voice was calm, but the room heard it like a gavel. Danielle froze, color draining from her face. "And Mark," Maddie continued, turning to her brother, "didn't Grandma co-sign your car loan?" The same car you brag about every single gathering. Mark stammered, his voice breaking. That's different. Different. Maddie raised an eyebrow. Because it's you? Because you decided your debts were more honorable than mine? Or is it only greedy when I get help? Silence slammed down like a hammer. The cousins glanced nervously at each other. Hannah shifted uncomfortably. Grandma's fork clattered against her plate, her eyes wide and stunned. For the first time in years, Danielle had no words. Mark's face was red with shame. And Maddie sat tall, finally letting the truth breathe in the air that had been choking her for so long. Grandma's hand trembled as she set her teacup down, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Maddie's papers still lay spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom, each one a quiet dagger cutting through years of lies. Finally, Grandma's voice broke the silence. I cannot believe this. Her tone wasn't weak or confused. It was sharp, cold, and laced with anger. She turned to Danielle first. You stood here time and time again, calling Maddie greedy, while all along you were taking money from me behind closed doors. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I'm a fool? Danielle's face flushed crimson. She pushed back from her chair with a loud scrape, pointing a trembling finger at Maddie. She twisted you, Grandma. She made you give her money every month. I was just trying to balance things. Balance things. Grandma's eyes burned. By lying about your sister? By turning me against her? Her voice cracked, but her anger was steady. You guilt-tripped me into thinking I was being unfair. You poisoned me against my own granddaughter. Danielle's chest heaved as she sputtered excuses, but no one listened. The cousins shifted uncomfortably. Even Sharon, who had once accused Maddie of manipulation, lowered her gaze in shame. Mark leaned forward, trying to salvage his pride. Look, it's not that simple. I only asked Grandma to co-sign for me because you wanted something you couldn't afford, Maddie cut in, her voice calm but razor-sharp. Don't pretend it was out of necessity. You chose convenience and expected Grandma to clean up after you. Mark's jaw tightened. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Maddie said, her eyes never leaving his. You and Danielle painted me as the villain while you fed off the same generosity you condemned me for. The tension snapped like glass. Danielle shoved her chair back, nearly knocking it over. I don't need to sit here and be lectured, she shouted, storming toward the door. No one tried to stop her. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, then silence followed as the door slammed behind her. Mark stayed seated, his face pale, muttering half-hearted defenses that no one believed. The cousins whispered among themselves. Hannah kept her head down, her cheeks burning. Then Grandma turned back to Maddie. Her expression softened, tears pooling in her eyes. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she whispered. I see it now. I see everything. You never asked for more than I could give. You never lied to me. I let them turn me against you, and I should have known better. Maddie shook her head gently. I don't need the money anymore, Grandma. I never wanted to be the reason this family broke apart. All I wanted was respect. To be seen for who I am, not who they made me out to be. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Around them, the family sat quietly, the truth finally undeniable. Danielle was gone, Mark's voice carried no weight, and Maddie, for the first time, sat not as the scapegoat, but as the one who had stood tall in the storm. The weeks after that explosive dinner were strangely quiet. For the first time in years, Maddie wasn't leaning on Grandma's monthly check. At first, it was hard, juggling extra shifts at the office, taking on freelance work in the evenings, cutting back on little luxuries she used to allow herself. But as the days turned into months, she noticed something surprising. The more she relied on herself, the lighter she felt. Every bill paid with her own money, every rent check that cleared from her hard work. It all gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. Grandma called often, checking in, her voice warm with concern. Are you managing okay, sweetheart? You know I'll always be here if you need anything. I'm doing fine, Grandma, Maddie would reply, smiling into the phone. Really, I am. And I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. But this time, I've got it handled. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could stand without anyone holding her up. And little by little, she did. Her boss noticed her dedication and offered her more responsibility. Her freelance clients kept returning, praising her reliability. For the first time, Maddie's financial stability came entirely from her own effort. And that sense of independence was worth more than any check ever could be. Meanwhile, the family dynamic had shifted. Danielle kept her distance, her bitterness simmering quietly in the background. Maddie heard from Hannah that Danielle was still fuming, telling anyone who would listen that Maddie had turned Grandma against her. But the truth was clear now, and no one bought Danielle's stories anymore. Even Mark, embarrassed by his role in everything, had gone silent. At the next family gathering, Maddie noticed the way people looked at her differently, not with suspicion or judgment, but with respect. Grandma beamed at her, introducing her proudly to neighbors as my strong Maddie who doesn't let anything knock her down. Later that night, Maddie sat in her small but cozy apartment, the bills stacked neatly on the counter, every one of them paid. She sipped tea, thinking back to that first dinner when Grandma had asked the question that set everything in motion. Is the $1,500 enough? Back then, the world had stopped spinning, every eye fixed on her in judgment. Now she didn't need that money. She didn't need their approval. She had her own. Danielle's voice of resentment no longer haunted her. Mark's excuses no longer mattered. What mattered was that Maddie had discovered something no one could ever take from her: the strength to build a life on her own terms. And as she lay down to sleep that night, she realized the greatest revenge she could ever have wasn't in exposing anyone or fighting for her place at the table. It was in thriving without their help, proving to herself, and to them, that she never needed it in the first place. Do you believe Maddie made the right choice by standing on her own without Grandma's money? Or should she have tried to repair things with her family instead? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story.